New Jersey, 1962. A man climbs to the top of an industrial storage tank in Bayonne and dips a measuring rod into the oil. The rod comes up coated. He signs the inventory sheet.
According to his records, that tank contains vegetable oil, but it actually contains water. You see, a thin layer of oil sits on the surface. It's enough to coat a dipstick. It's enough to fool a clipboard. It is enough to secure loans against over 1 billion pounds of inventory that just does not exist. The inspector climbs down. He does this at dozens of tanks, signing them all off. And Anthony Angelis, a butcher from the Bronx, known as Tino, watches from the ground.
How does a man who sold meat become the man who almost destroyed American Express?
Before the tanks in Bayonne, there was the meat. DeAngelis acquired the Adolph Goebel Company in 1949, and he immediately secured a contract for the federal school lunch program.
He delivered over 2 million pounds of uninspected, tainted meat. The government fined him. The Securities and Exchange Commission accused him of understating losses. By 1953, the company was completely bankrupt. A pattern was established. A man repeatedly caught, repeatedly charged, and repeatedly allowed to start again. So he formed Allied Crude Vegetable Oil Refining Corporation. He exploited the government's Food for Peace program. He undercut competitors. He secured vast government contracts, eventually building an empire of 32 plants.
From 1948 to 1963, I was the largest exporter of vegetable oils and animal fats from the United States. I was the salad oil king. He ruled over a sprawling, dilapidated tank farm near New York Harbor. Massive industrial units, holding 30,000 to 50,000 gallons each.
But how do you secure loans against over 1 billion pounds of inventory that does not exist?
You rely on basic physics. Vegetable oil has a specific gravity less than water. Therefore, it floats.
The physical mechanism of the fraud required absolutely no complex engineering. First, fill massive industrial storage tanks with seawater and sludge. Then, pour a thin, 2-foot layer of soybean oil on the surface. Lower the measurement dipstick. The weighted tape hits oil every single time.
Allied claimed to hold over 1 billion pounds of soybean oil. The amount that actually existed was a tiny fraction of that, mostly sludge and seawater. Yet warehouse inspectors issued receipts for this non-existent salad oil. American Express, Bank of America, Bank Leumi, and Chase Manhattan all accepted these receipts as unimpeachable collateral. They lent aggressively against tanks full of seawater. The simple science of oil floating on water caused $180 million in absolute financial loss.
So what made it stop?
A geopolitical shift brought down this entire house of cards. Angelis had built a massive position in soybean oil futures, betting heavily on an expected export deal to the Soviet Union. On November 15, 1963, that Soviet wheat deal stalled in the United States Senate. Futures prices fell. Margin calls arrived at Allied. Allied could not pay. The Commodity Exchange Authority began an investigation. Inspectors arrived at Bayonne. The tanks were opened. Cold seawater poured out. On November 19, 1963, Allied filed for bankruptcy. On November 20th, brokerages were suspended from trading.
The Dow drops more than 5% in 2 days.
Halt collapses. D. Arcamenzo goes bankrupt. Williston & Bean is forced to merge.
American Express stock falls 33%. It is the absolute devastation of the most trusted brand in finance.
Who looks at the victim of a massive fraud and sees the opportunity of a lifetime?
A 23-year-old investor in Omaha reads about the American Express collapse. His name is Warren Buffett.
On Wall Street, every other investor is selling in a sheer panic. But Buffett goes to Omaha diners. He goes to hotels. He goes to restaurants. He watches customers seamlessly paying with American Express travelers' checks. He watches waiters accepting them without a moment of hesitation. He concludes that the fraud has severely damaged the American Express balance sheet, but not its brand. He invests. The fraud that almost destroyed American Express created the investment that helped build Berkshire Hathaway.
What becomes of the salad oil king? Anthony DeAngelis is eventually indicted by a federal grand jury.
He is arrested on 18 counts. He is sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. He serves his time and, according to records, attempts further fraud after his release.
The man who called himself the salad oil king, the man who had 32 plants, the man who handled 68% of all United States vegetable oil exports, never once acknowledged that the tanks were full of water.
The Great Salad Oil Swindle changed how banks verify collateral. It changed how warehouse receipts are audited. It fundamentally changed how financial institutions conduct due diligence on physical inventory. We have 60 years of tighter rules today because a man put oil on top of water and let inspectors do the rest. Tino de Angelis died in 2009. He was 93. American Express is today worth over $170 billion, and Warren Buffett still holds it. The collapsing doesn't tell you what that means. The dipstick already told you everything.